I know a number of you last March met Rabbi Karen Kadar, the rabbi I worked with in Chicago. She was here for my installation. One of the many things that she taught me, that we talked about often, is that when we feel lost, or we feel like something around us is broken, or when we're not sure what to do next, we go back to basics. We go back to basics. And in our Torah portion this week, we get some of the basics about who we are. These core moments of what it means to be the descendants of Abraham. It starts with this moment right before Abraham has performed surgery on himself in an intimate part of his body, and 3 days afterwards, still in recovery, he's sitting outside his tent at the hottest part of the day. Not a great time to be in the desert outside, sitting. I'd probably want to be lying down if I were him. And while he's sitting there, he sees off in the distance 3 strangers. So he jumps out of his seat and runs to greet them. 3 days after that intimate surgery, he is sprinting in the desert, saying, "Please come to my home so I can wash your feet and feed you a meal." Through that moment with Abraham, a core part of who we are people with open tents who run to do the right thing, even and especially when it is uncomfortable or inconvenient, or what we really wish we weren't doing in that moment. We don't hesitate, we don't think for an instant, we get up and we sprint for a moment of kindness and graciousness for someone we don't even know. It's not for a cousin or for a friend. For complete strangers, we jump and run when it is uncomfortable for us to do something kind. A little while later, some other stuff happens in between that I would not recommend that we do. He passes off his wife as his sister. Don't do that. Don't do that. Later, God says something bad is going to happen. And God trusts Abraham enough to talk to God about it. Who are we? We are God's trusted partners for hard conversations. And Abraham has chutzpah. There's another word for it, but I only know the word chutzpah. Gall. We'll say gall and gumption. And argues with God. And says to God, "Should not the judge of all the earth deal justly?" Chutzpah is probably the right word for it. We are a people who speaks up for what is right, even if it is dangerous for us. Even if it feels risky or we are unsure, when we know what is right, we say it, and we say it bravely, and we speak truth to power. And at the end, and Spencer is going to read this tomorrow morning. You are. Don't worry. Trust me. This is what you're going to read. We are taught that we don't sacrifice the next generation for what we think might be prescient in the moment. We look ahead to what might be, and we are called not to destroy. We must think about not just who we are and what we think is necessary, but what future generations after us will need so that they can thrive and live. And surely there is trauma that comes along with this story. But we are a people invested in the next generation. We speak truth to power. We get up and run to do the right thing, even and especially when it is uncomfortable or feels dangerous or is not what we want to be doing in that moment. And those lessons, it doesn't matter which country we live in. It doesn't matter what century we live in. It doesn't matter who is the president or the king or the czar or the grand vizier or the Roman, whatever they were called back, the sentinels. It doesn't matter. That's who we are all the time. We inherit a message from the prophets that tells us that our rituals don't matter if we're not doing the right work when we leave the building. That is a mighty call. That is a heavy burden that we take on just by virtue of being ourselves. That's the legacy that we necessarily inherit, and it is a calling and an obligation that we receive and that echoes throughout the generations. Whenever we are and wherever we are, there is always work to do. We invest ourselves in what will be and what we cannot imagine yet. We speak truth to power even when it's dangerous to us. And even if it's uncomfortable or we're not sure or we'd rather not, we jump out of our chairs to run even for a tiny act of goodness and of kindness in the world. It's big work we have ahead, but we know we come to this place to strengthen ourselves so we can do that work out there together. Kain Yehi Ratzon, may we be worthy of this legacy, of this inheritance, and act in accordance with all that came before.